Demon Maker. The Chechuang ghost chuckled, it suddenly opened its eyes and waved its hand. Long's entire body was pushed into the coffin, then he hugged Keone. Both of them were locked deep inside, tightly packed, unable to escape. Long opened the door of the old grocery store, stepped into the dark, damp, dusty house, and called out loudly, "Uncle Juan, Uncle Juan." There was no sound or movement in response to him. It seemed like Uncle Juan that he was talking about was not here. Long is 22 years old and works as an editor for a book publisher. His main job is to edit horror books and best-selling works by famous authors. He republishes them into books to earn profits for the publisher. Dao Van Luan is one of the great writers that his publishing house Luang Sun needs to pay attention to. Dao Van Luan's works are often about horror stories related to life. Demons born from the human world, very bloodthirsty and sometimes cunning. His stories always give people a creepy feeling. Creepy from the words to the writing style, just reading through it makes people lost in a maze that cannot be stopped. Looking at the scene inside the house, according to the address of Dao Van Luan, the author with the pen name Kim Sun. Long saw that the entire house was full of sagging beams, dusty and moldy as if no one had lived there for a long time. This place always had a terrifyingly gloomy feeling. The corners of the house were pitch black, the dusty floor was stained with something extremely disgusting. Looking at these things, it was no wonder that such a horror-smelling writer could be created. It was probably because of the place he lived that this personality was formed. Creative cover. Mr. Luan had previously submitted a horror story project called Ghost Kyo to Luang Sun Publishing House. This horror story project was highly appreciated by the editors and editors-in-chief. After the first volume was published, there was continuous feedback from readers, demanding that the story need a second part. With the popularity of Ghost Kyo and its promising revenue, the publisher urged Mr. Luan to quickly complete the second part, and he also responded. However, since last week, which was the deadline for submission, Long still could not contact Mr. Luan. Calling him on the phone, only saw the phone ringing and then left there. The pressure from the editor-in-chief was too great, so Long finally had to personally track down the address that Mr. Luan had previously listed in the manuscript submission file sent to the publisher. On that file was written the address, house number 33 Lang Ka Alley, Kim Tien Street. This address led Long to a deserted suburb. This Kim Tien Street was a street located in a planned urban area. The surrounding houses were all deserted. Even when entering the alley, there were only a few people. Most of them were bad elements stealing and using drugs. The house was located deep at the end of the alley. Outside there was a sign saying, Luan Phuong Grocery Store. The sign has faded a lot over the years. Maybe this place used to be bustling and bustling. But I don't understand why it has become so desolate over time. Looking at the desolate room below, calling out but there was no answer. Long had no choice but to go up to the second floor. From the sound of footsteps, he guessed that there must be someone upstairs. He continued to call out loudly. "Uncle Luan, this is Long from Luang Sun Publishing House." There was still no sound in response to Long, only the sound of clacking, like the sound of shoes hitting a wooden floor. The dark staircase stretched all the way up to the upper floor. Long walked with heavy steps and a feeling of insecurity always surrounded him. From the only dim light, which allowed Long to visualize each step of the stairs, a pair of dull eyes slowly appeared. At that moment, Long looked up and was immediately startled. He was a little scared but realized that it was Mr. Luan, the famous author with the pen name Kim Sun that he had met last time at the publishing house. "Uncle Luan." He was excited and immediately called Mr. Luan. In response he just sighed and said, "You should go home. It seems I can't complete this story project anymore. I'm so sorry." After Mr. Luan finished speaking, he turned around and left. Long was very surprised by his answer. But he couldn't give up so easily. First of all, he had come all the way here, so he had to get something done. Second, if he didn't get anything done, he would get a beating from the editor-in-chief. So, even if Long couldn't convince Mr. Luan to continue writing this time, he had to hear a reasonable reason before leaving. He continued walking up the stairs, his voice extremely urgent. Uncle Juan, please don't make such a hasty decision. After all, this is your passion project. How could you bear to abandon me like that? From the second floor, Mr. Juan's sigh echoed down. I don't want it to be like that either, but it seems like I'm at my wit's end. I can't fight it anymore. From the very beginning, I shouldn't have created it. Long was surprised and asked. Uncle Juan, why do you say that? Mr. Juan suddenly shouted back to threaten Long. I'm telling you for the last time, go home, don't make me say it again. Long did not listen and was about to step up when the lights suddenly turned on. Mr. Juan appeared at the top of the stairs with his eyes wide open, staring at him, and then shouted. Get out. Before Long could say anything more, Mr. Juan immediately picked up a broom handle and swung it at him. Long had to turn around and run back downstairs. It seemed that this author had written too many ghost stories and had a mental problem. At times like this, it was best not to get involved. This time, Long had no choice but to give up on his plan to persuade Mr. Juan to continue his story project. Boom! The sound of a loud slap on the table, the editor-in-chief's big, chubby hand, his eyes narrowed as he looked at Long and shouted. Useless thing. I'll give you 2 more days. If you can't bring the manuscript back here, you can quit your job. The editor-in-chief's voice gradually faded behind the wooden door. Ever since Long stepped out of that room, his mind had been filled with thoughts of how to solve this problem. Why does Mr. Juan behave so strangely? What secrets are hidden behind these stories that would make a person who is passionate about his series give up halfway? Long's head was buzzing with chaos, and he suddenly bumped into someone. The soft skin and fragrant scent immediately made Long realize that he had bumped into a woman. The woman let out a gasp and then blamed Long in an angry voice. This guy is so cool, how can he walk without looking at the road? Long raised his head and looked up, and immediately recognized that it was Keone, also an editor at Luong Sun Publishing House. Keone was 26 years old this year, about 2 years younger than Long, and was an extremely beautiful girl. She was admired by many men, and they saw her as a lofty goal that needed to be conquered. Long also liked Keone very much, but Long felt that he couldn't reach her, so he had never talked to her before. Long looked at Keone and said, I'm sorry, I was just thinking about too many things. Keone stood up, adjusted her disheveled clothes, then turned to look at Long and said, Is it about the author Kim-sun? Long nodded in surprise. Yes, how do you know this? Keone lowered her voice slightly, looking unhappy as she said. The editor-in-chief instructed me this time to complete this matter with you. Tran Duc Long, do you know that you just dragged me to my death? Long scratched his head and ears and apologized again. Keone didn't even pay attention to him and immediately turned around and walked away, leaving Long standing there, hesitating. After work, Long left his office to return home, prepare dinner and eat quickly. After finishing his personal errands, Long started searching online for Kim-sun's biography and personal whereabouts, or in other words, he had to find out all the information related to Mr. Juan and analyze it tonight, to prepare for tomorrow to continue going to his house to persuade him. But first, he also needed to find out the reason why this incident happened that made Mr. Juan give up writing articles, whether it was related to something in the past or not. Ring ring. Suddenly the phone rang from his pocket, a strange phone number. Long frowned and thought to himself, wondering who would want to call him at this hour, but that was just a fleeting thought in his mind. He quickly pressed the answer button. Hello. From the other end of the line, a girl's voice echoed. Tran Duc Long. Long didn't know who was on the other end of the line, but the voice sounded familiar, but he still had to ask again. Who is that? Is it Keone? The voice on the other end was indeed Keone's. She quickly replied to confirm. Yes, it's me. Long replied. You call me so late at night, is there anything you need? Keone on the other end of the line laughed happily and said. Are you free? I have something to ask you. Come downstairs. I'm waiting for you downstairs. Long sighed and hung up. It seemed like he would have to stay up all night searching for information to make up for it. He also didn't know why this girl Keone would come to his house in the middle of the night and what she was doing. Long went downstairs and opened the door to see Keone walking unsteadily as if she was about to fall. So she was drunk. She was drunk and seemed very angry. Clearing his throat, he called. "What, you call me for?" Keone was so crooked that she could barely say a sentence. "Older brother." Then he immediately rushed towards Long and collapsed on him, passing out. Long was a bit panicked, but quickly helped her upstairs and put her on his only bed. After finishing, he breathed a sigh of relief and cursed himself. "Are you out of places to sleep? Since when did my house become a public house?" After speaking, he glanced at Keone, looking at her sleeping soundly and looking very beautiful. Perhaps if he had come across some opportunist, he would have taken advantage of her sleeping soundly to commit a depraved act, but Long was not that kind of person. He only glanced at her briefly before covering her with the soft blanket in the corner of the bed. Then he returned to the computer desk and continued to search for information about Mr. Luan. Dao Van Luan, born in 1966, comes from a family of teachers. His father is a teacher, his mother is also a teacher. He got married at the age of 24, and had 2 children, but at the age of 36, for unknown reasons, he left his wife. His wife later also went abroad and her whereabouts are unknown. Information related to Mr. Luan kept appearing. Long had to try hard to read and search, and finally he was able to discover a related detail. Mr. Luan's second son died at the age of 12. From then on Mr. Luan fell into turmoil and began to compose horror novels that became a hit. Long recalled the last time he met Mr. Luan. He saw that he looked very haggard. Could it be that this was the reason why Mr. Luan thought and wanted to stop writing? Long thought that the problem could only be here. This would be the key point for him to be able to convince Mr. Luan to continue writing the famous work, Kui Kyo. After reading those streams of information, Long immediately moved his head back to relax, preparing to go to sleep. Suddenly, he was startled, because Keone had been standing behind him for some time. What are you doing?" Long was startled and asked. Keone now lazily replied. "I was sleeping but suddenly I was so hungry so I woke up." "Do you have anything left to eat?" Long nodded. He was also a bit hungry at the moment. There was still some food in the fridge. He quickly processed it into a few simple dishes and put them on the dining table. Keone rolled her eyes and rubbed her hands, sniffling slightly as she raised her hand to evaluate. "I didn't expect a man like you could cook so well." Long smacked his lips and said, "Don't you know that famous chefs are all men?" Keone slightly curled her lips in a negative reaction, but she quickly sat down at the dining table, picked up her chopsticks and said, "Please have dinner." Then, without waiting for Long to reply, he put the delicious food in his mouth and chewed it thoroughly. Keone's small, pretty mouth sometimes pursed up, looking very adorable. Long just slightly restrained himself, sat down, and started eating. While eating, Long suddenly asked, "Keone, why are you so drunk?" Keone said dissatisfiedly while eating. "Isn't it because of you?" Long asked again, a little surprised. "For me?" Keone nodded and said calmly, "Yes, it's because of you. You made me go convince that old man Kim's son. To convince that old man, I had to drink with his son until I got drunk." Long was surprised and happy and said, "His son? Do you know his son?" Keone said, "Of course, you don't know? His son is architect Dao Nok Lam, very famous." Long suddenly stopped his chopsticks, put the bowl back on the dining table, then ran to the computer desk, looking at the information related to Mr. Luan. Yes, it was true that he had a son named Dao Nok Lam, but what Long did not expect was that Dao Nok Lam was the famous architect Dao Nok Lam today. This could be said to be extremely coincidental. If Keone had not confirmed it herself, perhaps Long would not have thought this was possible. Keone was eating and stopped to ask, "What's wrong? Are you that surprised?" Long nodded, sat down at the dining table and slowly said, "I just didn't expect it." "So have you found out any information?" Keone nodded and said. Dao Nok Lam is the eldest son of writer Dao Van Luan. About 10 years ago, he left his family and lived on his own. He then studied architecture and became famous for his financial tower project on Le Van Luong Street. Long tilted his head, listening attentively to Keone tell the story of Dao Nok Lam, an architect who caused a stir in the construction industry, and was sought after by countless large corporations. Dao Nok Lam was famous for his talent and wealth. So why did he let his father, Dao Van Luan, live in such an old, moldy house? After listening to Keone's story for a while, she finally concluded. From what I have learned, it is very possible that the reason why Kim's son stopped writing this time was most likely due to the death of his second son. Long nodded and said. What you found is very similar to the information I found online. Can't you find out anything more? Keone shook her head and said. He is very cunning, many times intentionally trying to avoid this matter. He wants to ask me to meet for dinner again. Long asked. So what do you plan to do? Keone calmly said. Meet, of course we must meet. Long laughed. Aren't you afraid he has intentions towards you? Keone shook her head. I can grasp all men's thoughts, he's just a fish in a pond, I can control him. Long said. I only have 2 days, starting tomorrow, to convince Kim's son to continue writing that series. Keone tilted her head slightly and said affirmatively. I know, and I only need 1 day to force Dao Nok Lam to tell that secret. Okay. Tomorrow I will try to convince Kim's son again. If he doesn't agree, then I will use your method, bring up that matter to force him. Keone swallowed all her food in one gulp, then drank some water, then turned around and climbed into bed to sleep. Long saw that and said. Don't you know you're in a stranger's house? Aren't you afraid I'll do something? Keone said in a sleepy voice. It's up to you. If you don't want to be reported to the police tomorrow, just. After saying that, Keone fell asleep, leaving Long standing there for a while with a puzzled look. Long turned around to clean the dishes, then lay down on the sofa and thought hard about what he should say to Kim's son tomorrow to convince him to continue writing the story of Kui Kyo. Thinking about the name of the story, Kui Kyo, there must be a reason why he named the story like that. Kui Kyo, isn't it the Bridge of the Devil? Why did he choose this name? Lying there thinking for a while but unable to think of anything, Long suddenly ran to the bookshelf, took out the published book of Ghost Kyo, and read it again to see if there were any details in the story related to him. Because it was often like that, in stories there were always very close connections to the real-life author. Many authors told their own stories. Could it be that Kim's son also told his own life story? The ghost story is a story about the barbaric form of sacrifice, the way the people of the ancient kingdom of Bondman created demons, sacrificing living people to create a demon with great powers to carry out the purposes of the demon creator. Usually, when these demons are created, they will serve the purposes of the Bondman royal family. The created demons are often bloodthirsty, inhumane, and serve only one purpose, endless revenge for its death. The ancient barbarian kingdom had a history of 109 years, but its descendants have been smoldering until modern times. According to Kui Kyo, some of the ancient royal bloodlines of the barbarian dynasty still exist, and still want to use Kui Kyo's method of creating demons to revive his dynasty. The Ghost Bride is a long-running story about the creation of 3 demons during the 109-year reign of the great king of the Wild West, allowing the dynasty to prosper during that time. But later, Effing Gum, Fong Gum, king of Lanzang, Dan Tuong, country, used the great priest of the dynasty to neutralize the 3 demons of the Bondman kingdom, annexing this ancient kingdom into his dynasty. Ending more than 100 years of existence of the Bondman kingdom and its mysterious stories. The first part of the story of the Demon Bridge tells the story of the first demon created by the first royal family of the Chechuang barbarian dynasty, which ruled Xiang Kuang in 1369. Chechuang killed his own daughter and sacrificed it to the Thai god of the underworld, Fa. The death of Chechuang's daughter created the first generation of the Demon Bridge, which killed all the chieftains of the Cheng Kuang region and forced their descendants to unconditionally obey the Chechuang king. Long read and reread all the facts in the book Kui Kyo, but did not see any details that could possibly be related to Dao Van Luan's real life. The only detail in Kui Kyo was killing his own daughter to sacrifice to create a demon. Could it be that Kim's son also killed his own son to create such a demon? Long thought about it and shook his head, cursing himself for being absurd. Because what era is this now that a father can kill his son, and what purpose would he have to create such a thing? Long smiled faintly for a moment, then closed the book. Started to close his eyes and sleep until morning. First round cover-up. Early the next day. Long had woken up very early. He looked around for a moment but could not see Keone anywhere. On the table was only a small piece of paper, with a few words that Keone had written, "Don't rush to meet Kim's son." Long frowned slightly and muttered to himself. Why? He wondered to himself why Keone did not want him to meet Mr. Luan. Could it be that she had something else to hide from him in this matter that she did not want him to know? But despite Keone leaving such a message, Long still decided to go to the house and meet Mr. Luan one more time to convince him. Closing the door, Long quickly jumped on his motorbike and sped to the suburbs, to Kim Tien Street, where Mr. Luan's old grocery store was located. Pushing the door open and stepping inside, just like last time, this place was old and moldy. The same musty smell kept hitting Long's nose, making him suffocate. He walked up the stairs like last time. This time before he could say anything, he saw Mr. Luan sitting absent-mindedly at the top of the stairs staring down, making him immediately jump in surprise. "Uncle Luan." Long called Mr. Luan in a slightly panicked voice, only to see him stiff as a log. A moment later, he answered. "If I continue writing, will you let me go?" Long nodded, but suddenly waved his hand and said, "I just want you to continue writing so that your hard work won't be unfinished. I don't mean to force you." Mr. Luan sighed and said, "Okay, you can go home. The manuscript will be sent tomorrow. You don't need to come all the way here." Long happily smiled and said, "Have you agreed to rewrite?" Mr. Luan nodded, then stood up and turned around to disappear. Long breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the sword hanging over his head from the editor-in-chief had been removed. If Mr. Luan had agreed, then he didn't need to convince him any further. Long only greeted Mr. Luan a few times for formality, then turned around and walked away. Returning home, he immediately called Keone. The other side immediately answered. "Hello," Long said happily. "I convinced him to continue writing. You don't need to meet that Dao Nok Lam guy anymore." Keone heard that and shouted into the phone. "Didn't I tell you not to go see him?" Long was confused and wanted to ask Keone why he couldn't do that, but the other end of the line had already turned off. Only about 30 minutes later, Keone appeared in front of his house, opened the door aggressively, rushed straight at him and gave him a slap like thunder. Long cried out in shock. Then Keone threw a stack of documents at his face and said, "Look, here's all the files on him that I got from Dao Nok Lam. You just made him prepare to kill another person, do you know that?" "Kill another person?" Long exclaimed in surprise, stared at the pile of documents in his hand and began to open them to read. Dao Van Luan had a history of mental illness at the age of 20 but was later cured. These events are not available in the online documents because they were carefully hidden. 10 years ago, Dao Van Luan's son died of respiratory failure and asthma because of his own mistakes, or in other words, he indirectly caused Dao Qian Kwok's death. He thought that Dao Qian Kwok's asthma inhaler was poison, and when he saw his son having an asthma attack, he had a fit of rage and snatched the inhaler, causing his son to die. This was hidden from the family, and in the end, his wife, Ko Ti Hai, had to leave. Only the eldest son, Dao Nok Lam, was left, and he packed up and left home after 6 months. The most notable thing here is that the lunatic writer later dug up his own son's body to carry out his plan to create a demon, in order to serve the purpose of writing books to become famous, needing a demon to serve him like in the story of the ghost. This is what led to Dao Nok Lam running away from home, leaving his lunatic father in that very old house. Long read for a while, but still did not understand why Keone said that there would be another death. Keone immediately explained. Did the first part of Ghost Bridge mention how to create the first generation of demons? Long nodded and said, yes. But what does that have to do with anything? Keone said. Daunok Lam himself explained to me that every time he writes a book, or wants to achieve a certain purpose of the book to make it truly famous, he needs to have a demon that matches what he wrote in the book, created for real, so that those situations can be applied in real life. Long stammered. So what you mean is, if he writes a sequel now, it means the appearance of a second demon. It also means that he will create another demon, and the second demon will appear at the same time as the series is written? Keone nodded and said, yes. Long shook his head and said, Keone, what's wrong with you? You can believe such absurd things? Keone said, I believe it, why wouldn't I? Daunok Lam can't lie, because he. Keone stopped halfway through her sentence, because Daunok Lam had actually appeared at some point. He was standing calmly beside her. Then he turned to look at Long and said, she believes because I saw him create the demon with my own eyes. Keone stammered. Brother, when have you been here? Daunok Lam smiled and said, ever since you got that document, I've been following you. Keone, do you think you're that smart? Do you think I can't see what your intentions are? Keone suddenly changed her attitude, crossed her arms and calmly said, okay, you guessed it right. But what happened between us is over, I have achieved my goal, what else can you do? Daunok Lam looked sly, suddenly stood in front of Keone, caressed her beautiful face and said, if I'm not mistaken, you like him, right? Daunok Lam pointed at Long and asked. Keone's cheeks suddenly turned red, she jumped up and said, what are you saying, why should I like him? Daunok Lam laughed and said, it seems you guessed right, I really like him, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to act like that. Daunok Lam paused for a moment and then continued. So what do you think? If my father, that crazy writer, starts creating the second demon, then the person you like will be in danger? Keone said sulkily. So what if he is in danger? But why is he in danger? Keone still asked. Daunok Lam continued to answer. Because if he wanted to create a second demon, he would naturally choose the person with the best qualities to create it. And of course this guy meets those requirements. Keone suddenly turned to look at Daunok Lam and asked, what are the conditions? Daunok Lam was complacent for a while, then arbitrarily walked into Long's house, looked around for a while and said, the house is quite nice, very similar to his style, maybe that's why he chose him. Keone said angrily, stop joking and explain everything clearly. Daunok Lam chuckled again for a while, then suddenly stopped laughing and said in a serious voice, okay, I won't joke with you anymore. He chose him for only one reason, because he entered that house, and was chosen by the first generation demon as the next successor. I guess it will be soon, just a few days from now, and he will have to die. The next demon that appears is also the time when the first demon must die, that is the law according to the demon bridge. Keone said. How do you know that? Daunok Lam said. Because he had read all the steps to create the 3 demons, he knew this in advance. After Daunok Lam finished speaking, Keone still stood rooted to the spot, her index fingers kept tugging at each other, her forehead wrinkled in thought with 2 frowning eyebrows. Daunok Lam suddenly pinched Keone's nose and said, look, he said he didn't like him. So what does your face look like right now? Keone mumbled something, not knowing what she was saying. She glanced at Long and then turned her head, her expression completely absent-minded and frightened. As for Long, he just stood there, hesitating, then thinking about the fact that he was the next generation of ghosts, he was terrified. As for whether Keone really liked him or not, he didn't care, he turned to ask Daunok Lam. So what should I do now? Daunok Lam said. The devil has chosen you as his successor, and within 3 days from the day you step out of that house, it will follow and kill you. The only thing we can do is stop my father from continuing to write. As long as he doesn't write any more stories, then of course the next generation of devils won't be born, and you will live. Keone suddenly said. Okay, then tomorrow we will go to that house and advise him to stop writing that series. Dao Nok Lam suddenly laughed and said. It's too late, you want to advise him? It's a dream. If he hadn't written it yet, it would still be possible, but if he had written it, the contract would have already begun. If he didn't write it, he would have died, and the demon would have escaped his control. By then, the demon could use its power anywhere. It would be an unimaginable disaster. Long panicked and said in a trembling voice. So what should I do? Keone also suddenly pulled Dao Nok Lam's hand and said. Yes, you must help him. Dao Nok Lam took the opportunity to put Keone's hand on his face and rubbed his face, taking advantage of it and saying. Keone, if you want me to help him, that's fine. Don't like him anymore, like me. Keone suddenly slapped Dao Nok Lam hard on the cheek and shouted. Enough, I don't like your joking anymore. Tell me, will you help us or not? Dao Nok Lam rubbed his face continuously and said. Keone, you're really strong. I didn't say I wouldn't help. Dao Nok Lam was laughing and talking, but his expression suddenly turned to horror, and his mouth suddenly stuttered. Kien Kwok, I. Dao Nok Lam said a few words and Keone saw a shadowy figure standing behind Long. However, that figure had just appeared and then immediately disappeared, leaving Long unable to see, and Keone unable to see who that person was. Only Dao Nok Lam said with a trembling voice. It's too late, he can't be stopped anymore, he's already in the second stage of creating a demon. You'll die tonight. Dao Nok Lam finished speaking and turned around and ran away. No matter how Keone called out, she did not turn back. Only she was left with Long. At this moment Long suddenly asked her. When did it start? Keone asked confusedly. Since when what? Long said calmly. When did you start liking me? Keone turned around without answering. Long then nudged her arm and said. Hey, answer me. Keone did not say anything. Long boldly hugged her tightly and said. Is this enough for you to have the courage to tell me? Keone just mumbled. I. She suddenly leaned her head on his chest and told him that she had liked him since the first day he started working. The only thing she didn't know was why Long always avoided talking to her. That always made her curious because in the company she was the one who always attracted her colleagues, especially the male colleagues. But Long was the only one who did not respond to her actions. Every time she was about to approach and talk to him, he would immediately avoid her. It was for these reasons that Keone was extremely angry. This time, seeing Long being beaten up by the editor-in-chief, she took the opportunity to help Long. In fact, she knew that the editor-in-chief was only threatening Long like that and did not really want to fire him. This kind of move was always used in work to pressure employees. As for Long having to urge Kim's son to finish writing the series, Keone also researched very carefully. In the end she decided to help Long, and through this time she hopes to have the opportunity to get closer to him. Hearing Keone whispering in her heart, Long suddenly burst out laughing, pinched her nose and then said. Silly, I've liked you for a long time. I've been avoiding you because I see too many male colleagues pursuing you. I don't think I have a chance, so I give up. Keone suddenly glared at Long, then happily closed her eyes and leaned against him. The two of them continued to chat like that until night. Long prepared dinner for both of them. During the meal like a first date Long said. Okay, let's put aside the nonsense that Dao Nok Lam said first. I think that he just wanted to deceive you, I'm fine. But Keone did not think so, she said. If what he said is true, that the devil will really appear today, what do you think? Long tilted his head and said. Then I will face it, that's all. Keone shook her head and said. It's not that simple. Just now, Dao Nok Lam himself mentioned the name of his younger brother, Dao Kien Kwok. And with my own eyes, I also saw a figure appear behind you. Keone was talking non-stop when she suddenly got scared. The last word she said was when a pale body appeared in front of her, with dull eyes. Long didn't understand what terrible thing Keone had seen, but he was sure that behind him there must be something so terrible that it made Keone gasp. He slowly turned his head, but saw nothing. He suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Keone, what did you see? What was it that scared you so much?" Keone was speechless, she couldn't say anything, she just rushed to grab Long's hand, pulling him and running like the wind out of the house. Along the way Keone didn't say anything but just cried. Long didn't understand, ran after her for a while, then pulled her arm back, put both hands on her shoulders and tried to ask, "Keone, what did you see?" Keone then wiped her tears. She pulled out a photo from her person. It was a photo of a boy around his 20s, thin body, pale skin, absent-minded eyes staring straight ahead. Long looked at the photo, then Keone immediately explained, it's him Dao Qian Kwok." Long asked, "Dao Qian Kwok?" Keone nodded, wiped away her tears and said in fear, He was standing right behind you just now." Long shook his head and smiled faintly in disbelief, saying, "Keone, you saw wrongly, no one appeared just now. It must be an illusion, it's all because that Dao Nok Lam guy scared you to death." Long pointed at the photo and said that Dao Qian Kwok looked a lot like Dao Nok Lam. They were real brothers, so they looked very similar. It was very possible that Dao Nok Lam had come back just now to scare Keone, because he really liked Keone, so he did this. Keone shook her head and said, "No, that's Dao Qian Kwok. Long, you have to listen to me, we have to go to his house immediately, stop him." Long sighed, wanting to reassure Keone, so he finally nodded in agreement. He quickly hailed a taxi, then went with Keone to Kim Tien Street in the suburbs of Hanoi. The car sped along the road, passing National Highway 1 for about 30 minutes and Kim Tien Street gradually appeared. The road was pitch black without a single light, stretching to the end of the road and reaching a small alley that cars could not enter. Long had no choice but to get out of the car with Keone and walk to Mr. Luan's house. Quack quack. When he reached the end of the alley, a crow suddenly flew out of nowhere, landed in front of a wooden pillar, and opened its mouth wide to make a terrifying sound. A crow's cry is a sign that someone is about to die. Keone held onto Long's arm with both hands, her eyes tightly closed. Long calmly held her hand tightly, walking towards Mr. Luan's house. Since he had come here, he had to go in and talk to him. As for whether what Dao Nok Lam said was true or not, Long did not really believe it. It was just that Keone was too concerned about this matter, so Long had to reassure her by bringing her here to meet him. "Here we go." Long suddenly stopped and shook Keone gently. Keone slowly opened her eyes. This was her first time coming to this house. The scene that greeted her eyes made her think that she was about to enter a haunted house. Long grabbed Keone's hand, suddenly pulled her hand to follow him and said, "This is the third time I've been here, follow me." Long walked over to open the door creaked, making a terrifying creaking sound. Keone heard that sound and suddenly her whole body shrank back. Long still gently held her hand and continued walking into the house. In the house, the atmosphere was gloomy and creepy. Occasionally, there was the intermittent meowing of a black cat, which made Long shiver a bit. Long's feet tapped on the wooden floor, creating clacking sounds. Keone curiously looked around the house for a moment, then walked very slowly after Long gradually walked to the stairs, then called out loudly, "Uncle Luan, are you home?" Long raised his head to look up at the upper floor, where a dim light was shining down. The only light came from the LED bulb on the electrical panel, and upstairs, the sound was still extremely quiet as if there was no one there. Long had been here twice, but he had never been able to go up to the second floor, because both times Mr. Luan had personally chased him away. The curiosity about the place where Mr. Luan lived, about the place where he had written the #1 horror story of the era, urged Long to continue walking up the rickety stairs, even though he was feeling a little uneasy. Then he thought about what Dao Nok Lam had said, he was the second generation of the ghost. And in this house, there existed a mystery created by Mr. Luan himself. Long suddenly felt a little hesitant to continue walking. But in the end, the secret and the truth hidden behind it urged him to continue going up to the second floor. The surrounding scene slowly appeared. Long saw only a small corner where a man was sitting diligently in front of an old computer. He was diligently typing the keys very quickly. He moved each key on the computer table skillfully like a pianist playing his own music. Uncle Juan. Long continued to call Mr. Juan, but he did not answer. He continued to type steadily, like a machine. Long called out several times but he did not answer, so he had no choice but to ignore him. He looked around the room on the second floor and saw many self-painted paintings hanging there, all depicting someone with his head tilted up to the sky, strangling himself in great pain. There were 4 identical paintings, hung in order with a certain distance between them. Long glanced over and saw a 5th painting, but this one was just a sketch, and did not have a clear shape yet, so he did not know who it was. Slowly paying close attention again, Long was startled and scared, because in the 4th painting, closest to the 5th painting, the body drawn in the painting was exactly the same as the photo that Keone had shown him, a portrait of Dao Qian Kwok. Long turned around, intending to walk towards Mr. Luan, when suddenly, Mr. Luan appeared right in front of him, his eyes wide open as he roared. I am the author of this story. After Mr. Luan finished speaking, he turned around and turned on a projector. The projector gradually started emitting light, and each character as shown in the painting appeared at the tip of the light beam from the projector. Mr. Luan was immersed in the images of the characters in the painting, and walked closer to the wall. He chose the closest person to stand opposite and talk. At first, Long only saw moving images in the video. Then he gradually realized the unreasonableness of the video that this projector was playing. The characters gradually became alive, and it broke free from the normal laws of physics. The rays of light were moving on their own and turning into real images. The figure in the video suddenly walked closer to Mr. Luan, rubbing his head at the exact corner where he was standing, as if this video had been pre-built with a hidden scene waiting there, and was only suitable when someone from the outside stood in. Then suddenly the figure in the video grabbed Mr. Luan's neck and broke his neck. Crack! Long opened his eyes wide in fear and stammered in panic. Are not. The characters in the video seemed to hear Long's voice and suddenly turned to look at Long, and Mr. Luan's neck was broken and fresh blood was flowing down. He died with his eyes wide open in horror as if he couldn't believe it, but also had a feeling of relief. As for Long, he was speechless and couldn't say a word. The characters in the video immediately rushed towards him. He didn't have time to think anymore, he just grabbed Keone's hand and pulled her away from this place. Right at the computer keyboard, the keys were still being typed evenly as before. Even though Mr. Luan was no longer sitting there, the keyboard was still being typed evenly. The story was still being composed, just as Dao Nok Lam had said. Nothing could stop it once it had begun. Clack! The steady sound of the keyboard typing echoed in Long's head. He kept his head down, dragging Keone along without caring about what was behind him. The streaks of light kept running from the second floor down to the first floor, chasing Long endlessly. Keone was panting. After running a short distance to the end of Kim Tien Street, she could no longer run. She pulled her hand out of Long's and said, "Leave me alone, go away." Long struggled and refused to let go, but Keone pushed his hand away and ran back. Long cried out in horror. Keone! But she had already run away and disappeared into the alley. Just 2 breaths later, Long heard Keone scream, a scream so horrible it sounded like someone had stabbed her in the throat. Long was so scared that he almost fainted. At that moment, streaks of light gradually appeared at the end of the alley. It showed that after killing Keone, it had not stopped yet. Long tried his best to turn around and run for his life. He raised his head and looked up at the sky, just praying that a taxi would pass by at this moment. The more Long ran, the more tired he felt. Even though he could no longer see the light, he still had the feeling that some invisible force was relentlessly pursuing him. If he stopped for even a minute, he would immediately be engulfed by it. Squeak! Suddenly a car appeared before his eyes, the headlights shone into his eyes, a man stepped out of the car. He was Dao Nok Lam. Dao Nok Lam looked at Long with a serious expression and said, "You idiot, you killed her." Dao Nok Lam stepped forward and punched Long repeatedly in the face, screaming like crazy. It seemed like he was crying. Long lowered his head and turned to look back, only to see a streak of light starting to appear at the end of the road. Dao Nok Lam grabbed his neck for a while, unable to say anything. He let go of his shirt, then wiped away his tears and sighed, saying, "Get in the car, quickly. If you don't want to die here." Long listened, immediately stuck his head into the car, lay down on the back seat and breathed heavily. Dao Nok Lam got into the car, quickly started the engine, turned around and left the place. As for Long, he was so tired that he lay down for a while and then closed his eyes and fell asleep. Splash! A bucket of cold water was quickly poured over him. Long woke up and took deep breaths. "Wake up!" Dao Nok Lam's voice rang in Long's head. Long woke up with a start. Dao Nok Lam looked at Long with concern and said, "I don't know why Keone likes a fool like you." Long immediately rushed over and grabbed Dao Nok Lam's collar, asking, "Keone, how is she?" Dao Nok Lam pulled the hand that was choking his neck away from Long's hand, then said, "Her? I'll let you see her tomorrow morning." Dao Nok Lam finished speaking and then punched Long again, causing him to fall unconscious. When he woke up again, Dao Nok Lam continued to beat him until he passed out. After doing this twice more, it was finally morning. Finally, Long woke up, and was about to punch him again when Long escaped. Dao Nok Lam did not continue to chase him but only said, "Okay, I won't hit you anymore. We can go see Keone." Long turned his head in disbelief. Dao Nok Lam immediately explained, "I don't want to hit you, but if you're still conscious, you won't be able to escape the ghost bridge, so there's no other way I have to do it." Long suddenly understood why Dao Nok Lam kept hitting him like that. It turned out to be to save his life. Dao Nok Lam continued, "It's already morning, so whether you're awake or not, the devil won't be able to come." Long turned back and asked about Keone. Dao Nok Lam said, "She has become the second ghost bride." Long did not believe it, so Dao Nok Lam immediately put him in the car, then drove straight to the house last night. When they reached the end of Kim Tien Street, both of them got out of the car. Dao Nok Lam opened the door and walked into the house as if nothing had happened. Long followed behind, only to see Dao Nok Lam walk up to the second floor, tears streaming down her face. Then she turned around and walked back downstairs and said to Long, "Look for yourself." Long walked upstairs, scanning the same paintings for a while. However, when he looked at the last painting, he suddenly realized that the person in the painting was Keone. She was just like the other paintings, committing suicide by strangling herself. Long sat down in a daze as if he couldn't believe his eyes. What happened yesterday was like a dream. Long ran like crazy downstairs, grabbed Dao Nok Lam's collar and asked, "Tell me, how can we save her?" Dao Nok Lam sighed, turned around, walked up to the second floor, then pointed at the computer and calmly said, Continue the third part of the story. Is this not difficult for you?" Long walked closer to the computer, paused for a moment, then he sat down, put his hands on the keyboard, and said in a harsh voice, "As long as I can save her, I will do anything." Dao Nok Lam nodded and said, "Then let the demon creation plan begin, part 3. Long nodded, about to put his hands on the keyboard to type, but Dao Nok Lam raised his hand to stop him and said, "But not now." Dao Nok Lam threw the manuscript that spilled out from the printer next to the computer and continued, "You need to read this second part to understand the content and write the third part. And in the meantime, we will have to search for the whereabouts of the great priest's successor. Only that person can dispel the evil spirit and help you." Long nodded in agreement. No matter what Dao Nok Lam said, he still had to listen. Because he was the only one who could solve this problem. According to Dao Nok Lam, the high priest of the Lanzang dynasty was the kingdom of Laos today. So that meant that if they wanted to find out where this person was, they would have to go to Laos and find him. But how could they find such a person among the millions of Lao people? That made Long wonder, so Dao Nok Lam immediately said, "A person carrying a demonic tribulation will naturally be sensed by the great priest's successor." Long asked, "How do you know that?" Dao Nok Lam immediately went to the corner of the room, from under the first painting, pulled out a wooden box and opened it. Inside was a very dusty ancient book, written entirely in Sanskrit. He said, "In this book of Secret to Creating Demons, it is mentioned. We simply return to the ancient capital of Lanzang, where my father discovered this book, and officially begin the so-called Ghost Bridge, that is, if you can meet such a person, they will come to you." Dao Nok Lam personally revealed that the so-called Ghost Bridge originated from the fact that more than 20 years ago, when Mr. Luan lived in Laos, he discovered this secret book and an ancient relic there. This led to the revival of an ancient ritual of the ancient barbarian dynasty, reviving a legend that had been dead for decades. Long took the book. The ancient book was all in Sanskrit, so Long couldn't understand it. It was all thanks to Dao Nok Lam's explanation that he finally understood how the three demons were created. And Dao Nok Lam also explained clearly why there were 5 paintings hanging here. One was Dao Kien Kwok, one was Kyo Ni. Dao Nok Lam explained the remaining 3 paintings. Those were the first 3 demons in the ancient barbarian dynasty. Dao Nok Lam pointed to the first painting and said, "This is Chechuang's daughter, also the first demon." After Dao Nok Lam finished explaining, he only urged Long to go home and prepare, because tomorrow morning, he would go with him to Luang Prabang, the ancient capital of the Lanzang dynasty. There, he had a way to contact a Laotian priest. Dao Nok Lam believed that this person could find the whereabouts of the great priest's descendant who was living there. Long began his journey to find the key to open the Ghost Bridge to save his girlfriend from the ghost-creating game of the crazy writer Kim's son. After today, he will officially begin the ghost-creating game, and will be unintentionally forced into the path that he himself created, the next generation of ghost creators. Long himself did not know that, before that, Mr. Luan had also accidentally fallen into this game. And the one who trapped him, was the one standing behind him. Dao Nok Lam watched Long's figure disappear behind the door and enter his house, then only gave a faint, sinister smile. The game was now officially starting as he wanted. 000. The ancient capital of Luang Prabang was originally called Muangzoa, occupied by Kun Lo in 698. And after Lanzang disintegrated in 1707, it has been a provincial capital of Laos to this day. After hundreds of years of erosion, the ancient citadel of Luang Prabang is still intact. Long and Dao Nok Lam crossed the border and went straight to the ancient capital of Luang Prabang in just one day and in a 4-seater car. Long looked back at the back of the car cabin, where 5 paintings were neatly arranged in order. Dao Nok Lam explained that in order to solve the evil spirit, he had to bring them along. And the paintings would be essential for the Laotian priest to find clues about the great pastor's descendants. The 4-seater car suddenly stopped in front of a wooden house, only about 200 meters away from the ancient ruins of Luang Prabang. From here Long could see the entire relic site. Dao Nok Lam explained that the reason the priest chose this place to stay was because of this ancient relic site. He said that this place had the aura of Buddha, which was left over from the era of the Pagoda Kingdom. This was very useful for his cultivation work. Entering the wooden house, Dao Nok Lam urged Long to take off his shoes and leave them outside before he could enter. Because this priest loved cleanliness, he did not like strangers entering his house and dirtying his floor, because he considered it an insult to a sacred place. Clank! The sound of bells rang out like monks chanting in a temple. A man dressed in Laotian brocade was kneeling in front of a shrine filled with incense smoke. In front of him was a tray of 5 fruits that had been carefully arranged, along with a statue of a 1,000-armed Buddha. The statue's eyebrows were slightly raised, and its eyes were squinted, looking ahead with a cold expression. "Suryaving!" Dao Nok Lam suddenly called out. The man immediately stopped chanting in Sanskrit, his head turned slowly. He glanced at Dao Nok Lam, then began to speak to him in Lao. Dao Nok Lam smiled and spoke very naturally, because when he was young, he also lived in Laos. Much later, Dao Van Luan's family moved back to Vietnam to live, so Dao Nok Lam's Lao is still very fluent. After a long while, the two of them finished talking, and suddenly the man named Suryaving stood up and walked slowly towards Long, his face looking intently at Long's as if assessing something. He looked at Long for a while, then suddenly approached him, pressed his index finger on Long's forehead 3 times, and muttered in Sanskrit that Long did not understand. Dao Nok Lam signaled Long to ignore him, that he just needed to stand still. Long listened, and watched Suryaving's every move to see what he was going to do. After muttering for a while, Suryaving suddenly withdrew his hand, turned his back, sighed, looked at Dao Nok Lam, then explained in Lao, and asked Dao Nok Lam to get him something. Dao Nok Lam nodded in understanding, then turned to urge Long and said, "He wants to see the projector, he wants to turn it on to make the demons appear." Long was a bit surprised and asked Dao Nok Lam again. "Projector?" He wanted to watch the video on the projector. "But I remember clearly that the projector was not connected to anything, so how could it play the video?" Dao Nok Lam pointed to 5 paintings and explained. "The projector is just a tool for us to see them appear. When we encounter materials that match their properties, we can easily see the story unfold. Otherwise, they basically always exist around the paintings, we just can't see them with the naked eye." Long nodded in understanding, so the projector was just something like a conductor. He turned back to the car, opened the trunk and brought the projector back into the house. After plugging it in, he was about to turn it on, but Dao Nok Lam quickly stopped him. "Wait, this thing has to be turned on at night. The demons won't appear during the day." Long was a bit nervous, so he probably forgot this. Last time it was Dao Nok Lam who knocked him out at night just to stop the demons from following him. Because when it was daytime, they would not be able to appear in this world. Long hoped that the night would come soon, because if what Dao Nok Lam said was true, when this projector was turned on, all 5 demons would appear. And among those 5 demons, one of them was Keone, Long's girlfriend. At exactly 9 o'clock in the evening, Suryaving sat in front of the shrine, with 5 paintings surrounding him. The electric lights went out, leaving only the light from the candles. The light from the candles shone on Suryaving's face, making his face look slightly yellow and extremely scary. "Fail." Long turned on the projector switch. The circle inside the projector rotated as if it was showing a film. The light shone on the wall of the shrine, slowly revealing figures like the last time. The hazy figures were constantly looking in the distance, then there were moving lights surrounding Suryaving in a very magical way. Suryaving looked at the moving demon spirits, suddenly shouted loud words to talk to them. All the demon faces turned to look at Suryaving and screamed. They approached slowly and surrounded Suryaving like Mr. Luan before. The demons felt offended and wanted to kill Suryaving at the last moment. But Suryaving was not an ordinary person. He shouted Sanskrit mantras very urgently, forcing the demons to retreat and began to question him. The demons kept holding their heads in agony, their eyes looking at Suryaving with hatred. Of the 5 demons, only the first demon remained still from beginning to end. It stared at Suryaving without making any move. Even when he recited the Sanskrit mantra, it did not care in the slightest, nor was it affected by the mantra. It observed for a long time, then its dull eyes gradually turned to look at Dao Nok Lam. Its mouth slightly curled up, looking extremely vicious. Suddenly Suryaving jumped, turned towards Dao Nok Lam and shouted, signaling him to do something. Dao Nok Lam's face suddenly turned pale. He rushed towards the door as if he wanted to run away. Then in a flash, the ghost of the female demon, the first demon, disappeared, and appeared right in front of Dao Nok Lam. It smiled extremely disgustingly, then reached out to grab Dao Nok Lam's neck to drag him away. Only saw Dao Nok Lam's face. Extremely terrified, then suddenly lost his spirit, he collapsed to the ground, his face turned lifeless. Dao Nok Lam's soul had disappeared, only left was a lifeless body with eyes wide open in fear. The old priest screamed in agony. He flew out the door and ran towards the direction the demon disappeared, breathing heavily. Long did not understand what happened, only saw Suryaving return dejectedly a moment later. He sat down in front of the shrine, clasped his hands and sighed, and the images of the demons all disappeared at once. Long ran to shake Dao Nok Lam. "Dao Nok Lam, what's wrong? Tell me what happened." But Long shook him forever, but Dao Nok Lam did not respond. His heart was still beating, his breathing was still steady, proving that he was still alive. "So why?" Long turned to the old priest and asked in a harsh voice. "What's wrong with him?" The old priest seemed to understand what Long meant, but he could not speak Vietnamese, so he could not explain. He suddenly stood up, walked out the door, and then disappeared. A moment later, he returned with a girl. As soon as the girl entered the door, she clasped her hands together to greet Long and said in Vietnamese, "Mr. Sir wants me to explain to you?" Long suddenly asked, "Are you Vietnamese?" The girl shook her head and replied, "I am Laotian, but I know Vietnamese very well because I once went to Vietnam to study." Long nodded. At least there was someone who could help him explain what had just happened. He quickly asked, "You should ask him quickly, why did Dao Nok Lam become like that? What about the traces of the great pastor's successor?" Long pointed at Dao Nok Lam and asked repeatedly. The girl nodded and then turned back to ask the old priest. He listened attentively for a while, then nodded and answered in Lao. After listening, the girl immediately translated for Long and said, "He was already possessed by the first demon, and Master Sir has also found traces of the great priest's successor." Long shouted, "Tell me, who is that person?" Long thought of Keone and couldn't help but feel impatient. The girl was a bit startled by Long's attitude, but quickly replied, "It's him." She pointed at Dao Nok Lam and confirmed. Long was a bit absent-minded, then turned to Suryaving to ask to be sure. "You say he is the great priest's successor?" "Impossible." Long shook his head in disbelief, but Suryaving nodded firmly in affirmation, then spoke for a while. The girl immediately explained. "Master Sir said he was sure, because when he called the 5 demons, they themselves, when they saw Dao Nok Lam, revealed their weakness, and the proof was that the first demon, Naktha, had captured his soul." Long exclaimed, "Naktha, that's the name of the first demon?" Suryaving nodded in affirmation, then began to tell the story of Naktha. After listening, the girl continued to translate. Naktha is Chechuang's second daughter. There is a theory that she is the result of an incestuous relationship between Chechuang's younger sister and him. Because he did not want his terrible act to be exposed, Chechuang killed Naktha to cover up the evidence, and also trained her to become a demon to serve his purposes. Long broke out in a cold sweat after hearing this. So this was how the demons started. No wonder Naktha became a demon with such terrifying abilities to kill people and take their lives. It was because its origin sounded a bit disgusting. After the girl finished speaking, Suryaving continued speaking for a while so the girl could translate. Naktha brought Dao Nok Lam's soul to the Devil Mountain, which is where the origin of the demon Naktha began, and we need to go to the Devil Mountain next. Destroy its demon-transforming vessel to free Dao Nok Lam's soul, then let him return to his body. Finally, together with Dao Nok Lam, break the curse of the demon bridge, then your girlfriend can come back to life. After the girl finished explaining, Long immediately nodded. "Okay, let's go now. Where is that mountain?" Suryaving shook his head, and the girl explained. "No, that mountain is in Wapham province. Its modern name is Phu Hope Mountain, and the demon tomb where Naktha originates can only be opened on the 15th day of every month. We have to wait until that day. Master Sir wants you to stay here during that time to study the Dharma, to protect yourself, otherwise you will not be able to enter that mountain." Long was impatient and immediately disagreed. "I don't need to learn the law, he just needs to go there that day and that's it." The girl shook her head and replied. "Master Sir said that only the demon creator has the fate to destroy the birthplace of Naktha. And you are the demon creator, you need to learn the Dharma to fight against the demons on Phu Hope Mountain." Long was stunned and then muttered, "I am the demon maker." Then he nodded, thinking it was right, because Dao Nok Lam himself had said that the creator of the story was the creator of the demons. Dao Van Luan was a demon maker, and so was Chechuang, who had died 1,000 years ago. After that day, every day Long had to practice magic seals with Suryaving, which he said were his talismans. Suryaving gave him some brocade dolls and told him that these dolls were demon-attracting dolls. When they entered the Fuhope Peak on the 15th day, the ancient demons of the mountain would awaken at the same time. And at that time, as long as there were enough of these dolls, they could be sucked inside. Since the number of demons on Fuhope Mountain was so great, he would need to research the route with the least demons, and follow that path. During these days, Suryaving spent most of his time refining such dolls, in preparation for the trip. And the last days have come. The three people Long, the girl and Suryaving have moved to Wapan province since morning. When the sky turned to afternoon, it was also the time when the three people appeared at the foot of Fuhope Mountain. The mountain was towering, covered with trees. The green forest was vast and dense, and flocks of birds flew around, darkening the sky. The melodious sounds of the sky and earth could not dispel the gloom of this mountain. From the end of the horizon, flocks of black sparrows flew down like rain, making the leaves heavy. They all turned their eyes towards the three people, watching them intently, and occasionally they would jump towards them from branch to branch. The black sparrows were very bold, as if they had a premonition of something, so they surrounded the three people as if they were saying goodbye. Suryaving put his backpack on his back and started following the trail leading into the mountain. There are many trails leading to the top of Fuhope Mountain, but the most difficult path chosen by Suryaving is the Rocky Gorge. The path is known by the locals as the Path to Death. The road was initially a dirt road with old birch trees, then deeper into the clove tree species that was almost extinct in Vietnam and now only existed in Laos. The higher up the mountain, the more barren the rocks became, preventing trees from growing. Only occasionally there were a few vines clinging around. The vines tangled on the rocks seemed to write a kind of language representing the green forest. Halfway up the mountain, the slope suddenly became gentle, a valley gradually appeared. Suryaving wiped his sweat and put down his bag. He explained that this was the legendary Devil's Ravine, which was said by the people at the foot of Fuhope Mountain to be the entrance to hell, and anyone who entered it would never come out. As he approached the valley, Long could smell something very unpleasant. It was not the stench of rotting flesh, nor was it fragrant, it was just a phosphorus-like smell that gave people a headache, and their whole body felt sluggish and uncomfortable, for no apparent reason. The girl who was with Long had a pale face from fatigue. It seemed like this place also made her feel very uncomfortable. Suryaving suddenly gave the girl a necklace and told her to put it on. The girl obeyed, then put the necklace around her neck. After a while her face became much brighter. Long was surprised and asked, "What is the use of that bracelet he gave you?" The girl explained. "This is the Thaplung bracelet, an exorcism bracelet that can only be used by women. Usually, in places where there are ghosts, women who come near will have headaches or feel much more uncomfortable than men because they are afraid of negative energy. Men have more positive energy so they can overcome this, that's why Master Sir gave me this bracelet." After the girl finished speaking, Long nodded in understanding, then turned to ask Suryaving, "So why are we stopping here? Why don't we get started and deal with the demon right away?" Suryaving shook his head and explained, then the girl translated. "We can't go on now, we have to sit here and wait until midnight. Then the entrance to the devil's tomb will appear and we can go the right way. If we go right away, not only will we not reach our destination, but we will also get lost in this entrance to hell, never to be able to go out again." Suryaving further explained that the evil spirits in the valley are very clever. They will wait for the person to get lost deep into the valley, then gradually lead the way and steal the person's soul without them knowing. Therefore, if not careful, it is very possible that the demons of Fuhope Mountain will kill them. Long sat quietly, waiting attentively for time to pass. The occasional chirping of forest birds sent shivers down Long's spine. The terrifying croaking of nocturnal predators, the melodious chirping of cicadas, and the flickering insects flying in the night created a terrifying scene. The closer to the valley, the stronger and colder the wind blew, and the unpleasant smell that made people feel uncomfortable continued to linger. Although he did not know what it was, he had the feeling that it gave people a headache. More than the smells that people could smell clearly. Long held tightly the dolls that Suryaving had trained in his hand, then looked far away into the valley with increasingly urgent eyes, because 12 o'clock at night was approaching very close. Suddenly, one of the dolls in Long's hand shook violently. Long was so frightened that he threw the doll to the ground. The doll shook more and more violently and then suddenly stood up. It turned its head to look at Long. At this moment, Suryaving pointed something at the doll and threw it at it. The doll immediately exploded. But then, 3 more dolls in Long's hand gradually began to come to life. They were like sentient beings, extremely terrifying. Suryaving knew that he could not wait any longer, so he explained to Long that the demons from the valley had begun to lose patience. They had broken their own limits and poured out of the valley, wanting to drag the 3 people in. This was the time when the demons in the valley were the most crowded, but it was also the time when Naktha's demon tomb was about to open. The 3 people were forced to make a choice, to risk the greatest danger and enter the demon tomb, or give up this time and let the time for Naktha's demon tomb to open pass. Suryaving also warned that the longer it took, the lower the chance of Keone being saved, and the chance of Dao Nok Lam being able to regain his senses was 0, because by then Dao Nok Lam would have become Naktha's slave, and nothing would be able to stop him anymore. Long nodded in agreement and said to Suryaving, "Okay, we accept the bet. This ghost game must be solved before the next person dies." Suryaving accepted the bet and told Long that when midnight came, he would throw out all the dolls and run as fast as he could to the demon tomb. As long as he could solve the demon curse, he would have a way to leave the demon tomb safely and reach the foot of Fu Hope Mountain. As planned, when the clock struck 12 o'clock, the moonlit sky suddenly darkened, and the black sparrows sleeping at the foot of the mountain woke up in a panic. They rushed towards the valley, and one after another, they crashed into the cliffs of the valley and died. The sparrows' blood splattered everywhere, creating a very strange scene. Suryaving explained that Naktha wanted to use blood to bathe its grave. It wanted to be reborn as a human, and the later it got, the more creatures around this mountain would die. At some point, it could even invite living people to commit suicide to complete its plan. Suryaving finished speaking, then turned around and shouted loudly, jumping into the first valley. Long immediately followed closely behind, and he held the girl's hand and pulled her along. Long threw the dolls into the air and kept running straight. The dolls fell to the ground one after another, then suddenly seemed to have sentience, and stood up and chased after the 3 people, continuously making creepy giggling sounds. Long was so scared that he kept running straight. Suryaving's figure gradually disappeared and he could no longer be seen. Then the Laotian girl's hand that was translating suddenly slipped out of Long's hand. Long tried to turn back to look for the girl, but her figure had also disappeared. All around him was a dense fog. Suddenly, Long looked down and saw snakes and centipedes crawling all over the ground. He was so disgusted that he quickly continued running, continuously calling out to the girl and Suryaving. After running for a while, he suddenly bumped into someone. When he stood up, he saw that it was Suryaving. He was staring at something and absent-mindedly muttering. Suddenly he pointed in that direction and shouted in Lao, signaling Long to look. Long looked in that direction and saw only a lump of flesh and blood, like a rotten mass of flesh writhing with maggots as big as a human body, constantly moving. But what was more terrifying was that the mass of flesh was only the head, because from the ground, similar pieces of flesh were still constantly emerging. In the mass of flesh and blood, Long could see the shape of someone moving. Long looked closely and immediately discovered that it was Keone. He was about to run to free her when Suryaving stopped him, shouting at the top of his lungs to advise him in Lao, which he did not understand. Then suddenly the fog thickened, separating him and Suryaving, causing them to lose each other again. Long had the idea of running to save Keone. He ran straight in the direction where the mass of meat had just appeared, but he ran and ran without seeing any destination. Suddenly a girl's hand reached out and grabbed his hand. Long was a little startled and turned around to see that it was the female interpreter. She was looking at him in fear and said, "I don't know why I fell. Luckily I reached out and caught your hand as soon as I fell, otherwise we would have lost each other." After the girl finished speaking, Long's eyes widened in fear. If the girl had just fallen, then where did the scenes Long had seen come from? Could it be that in just a split second, everything had been his imagination? Long was scared and shook his head in disbelief. He was about to turn around and ask the girl if she was mistaken, but he was startled and let go of her hand. Because when he looked back at this moment, it turned out that the girl he was holding hands with was not the Lao girl, but Keone, his girlfriend. Keone, you. Long stuttered in fear and cried out, only to see Keone giggle and say, "What happened to you? Why are you running so fast? I can't catch up with you. The demons in the demon bridge are right behind us." Keone finished speaking and turned her head to point behind, then she ran in that direction and disappeared into the mist. Long immediately shouted and chased after Keone saying, "Keone, don't go." He tried to reach out and grab her hand, but only felt his hand slipping into an unknown space. Long was terrified and thought he was dreaming. Then he saw Suryaving and the girl appear from behind him in the mist, running towards him and shouting. The girl said, "What are you doing standing there like a statue?" "Teacher sir, and I called you but you didn't answer, so we had to go back." "Hurry up, the demon's tomb is about to open." Long stammered to explain the scenes he had just seen. Then Suryaving explained that it was very possible that the demons in the valley had transformed into human form and tricked him, wanting him to follow them to capture their souls. Suryaving decided that from then on the three of them would hold hands and walk slowly in the valley, so that the demons could not play any more tricks. Suryaving surrounded the three people with 7 dolls. Every time a doll on any side moved, he would immediately destroy that doll and replace it with another one. As the three of them walked forward, the valley gradually receded. The surrounding fog gradually cleared and a valley began to appear before them. Suryaving said that this was the birthplace of Naktha, where Chechoang had an affair with his younger sister in this valley. Originally, the valley out there was just a normal valley. The reason it became a demon valley was because Chechoang himself ordered to bury with Naktha all of the princess's entourage who died in that valley, becoming the ghosts guarding this valley. Only the valley was the entrance to the valley and there was no other way. This valley was the demon tomb that Suryaving mentioned. After entering the valley, Suryaving again mentioned the matter of the demon bridge. When the demon maker starts creating a new demon, the previous demon dies. The term die here does not mean the spirit of the demon dies, but its body. To put it simply, an easy-to-understand example is that when Dao Van Luan created Dao Qian Quoc to live as a ghost bridge, if the ghost bridge is resolved, Dao Qian Quoc still has the possibility of being resurrected. But if the next demon is created, the body connected to Dao Qian Quoc's soul will die completely, and he will only have the ghost soul left. Likewise, Xiao Er is currently temporarily a ghost. Her body was sucked into the painting, so as long as the ghost curse is lifted, she can still live again. But if the next ghost is created, she will never be able to live again. When the next ghost is determined, the previous ghost will die, fulfilling this saying. Keone has temporarily become a ghost, when the third part of the series is continued by Long. The curse of creating a ghost has been activated, and Keone begins to act according to the instincts of a ghost. She will choose the successor ghost. Long will be the one to know, but he does not know who that person is for now because the series has not been finished yet. Suryaving reminded him that, as soon as he forms an idea of who that person is, he must immediately inform him. Because that is also the time when Keone will start her killing actions. Long agreed with Suryaving, and urged him to quickly find Naktha's grave to dispel the curse of the demon. When the valley is plunged into pitch-black darkness, Naktha's tombstone cannot be seen. Suryaving, based on the ancient story of Fan Gom, recounts that when the tombstone is revealed above the foliage of the first sunlight, the demon has been buried for 1,000 years. In accordance with Fan Gom's words, the demon was indeed buried for 1,000 years before being dug up by Mr. Luan, the crazy old writer Kim's son, to serve his own purpose of becoming famous. The sky gradually approached dawn, the gloomy valley gradually revealed itself in the red sunlight. This valley was not very big, only a few hundred meters, and people could easily see in the middle of the valley a very large mound of stone, as big as a house, gradually appearing under the foliage. Because it was at the right angle of the early sunlight, people could easily see that mound of stone. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to see it normally, because it was hidden behind the dense foliage of the trees. Long exclaimed. It's true to the saying that when the first ray of sunlight comes, the tombstone appears. So it also has this meaning. The three of them continued to walk quickly towards the rock. Long's heart constantly had a feeling of restlessness. He felt like he was about to be freed, but also had the feeling that he was about to step into something many times more vague, that things were not just that simple. Long walked slowly, walking next to the girl. After living with her for a while, Long learned that this girl's name was Athanavong. She had studied for 3 years at an economic school in Vietnam. Athanavong is Suryavong's only grandchild. When she was 10 years old, her parents died. So she had to live with Suryavong in the house in Luang Prabang. Athanavong was not married yet, she was only in her early 20s and was working at a travel agency. When Suryavong called her back to translate for Long, she was still a tour guide for a tour group visiting the ancient capital of Luang Prabang. While waiting for Suryavong to find the entrance to the tomb, Long talked more with Athanavong and asked about her life. He felt that Athanavong had many similarities with Keone. Besides her cheerful personality, Athanavong's smile seemed to resemble Keone's, making Long like her even more. As the two of them went through many things that happened in the past half-month, Long had some feelings for Athanavong that he couldn't explain. Dramatic. As the two were conversing, suddenly the stone stele split in two. A pitch-black passageway was revealed and Suryavong shouted for the two. Long immediately turned his head to look in that direction, then walked steadily to observe as Suryavong said. He began to urge Long to open the laptop he was carrying and start writing the story. The projector was also turned on at the same time, along with 5 paintings displayed around it. Suryavong waited patiently, then repeatedly reminded Long that whenever the idea of a ghost appearing, who it was, he must immediately say it. Long nodded in agreement and began to compose. Black lines of text gradually appeared on the Word document, the lines of text curved like live film slowly flowing out. When the story of the second Ghost Bridge ended, the third generation of Ghost Bridge, the third ghost created by the descendants of Chechoang, was also the time when the second ghost appeared to lure the unfortunate person. The more Long wrote, the thicker his sweat became, and he felt like he was getting closer, closer, and closer to the next demon's appearance. The words continued to appear, then at one point finally stopped at the ellipsis. Long turned back to look at Suryavong and said, I thought at this point that Naktha would appear. Suryavong asked where. Long just furtively looked behind him. He didn't think that those things had just flashed through his mind, and in reality it was true. Because since when, behind him, the demon Naktha was standing looking at him, it grinned, its white eyes wide open with delight. It was as if it had been standing there for a long time observing the three of them. Suryavong screamed, chanting mantras to drive away the demon. Naktha disappeared again, and Long continued writing. The more he wrote, the more he felt that Keone was sitting next to him. When he turned around, she was indeed sitting there looking at him. Her face was extremely terrifying. Her lips were dry and pale, her face was gaunt and bare, her black eyes stared blankly at Long, pleading. Long could hear her whisper, Long, die with me. The whispering stopped as Keone disappeared. Long wiped away the sweat and continued writing. The tomb opened, the projector slowly turned around but no ghost appeared. The entire valley was plunged into pitch darkness, the only time it could receive light was at dawn, when the rising sun shone on the tombstones. The rest of the day, it was obscured by the cliffs, making the sky pitch black with nothing but cliffs. Making the gloomy scene in this place never-ending. Long wrote until his shirt was soaked with sweat. He had never felt that writing was such a torture. Suryavong waited patiently, waiting for the inscription mentioning the next demon to appear. Because then all the demons would be revealed, and that was when they were at their weakest. If he could just capture Naktha, the curse game for the demon maker would officially end. From the tombstone, Suryavong took out a jar, which had been holding the demon Naktha for 1,000 years. However, after Dao Van Luan awakened Naktha by creating a demon using Dao Qian Kwok's body, the seal of the high priest lost its effect. Suryaving needed Dao Nok Lam to personally seal Naktha to break this curse. And when the next generation of demons appeared, Naktha would be at his weakest. At that time, he could take advantage of Naktha's weakness to use the Buddhist scriptures to pull back the imprisoned soul from Naktha, allowing Dao Nok Lam to regain his soul and live again. Clack! The sound of the keyboard finally stopped, only to see Long with his eyes wide open in fear, his mouth trembling and stammering. He kept shaking his head. Ithanavong saw that and asked, "Have you found the next demon?" Long nodded, looked furtively at Ithanavong and said, "It's you." He pointed to the screen, and behind the 3 dots that ended a terrifying chain of reasoning in the plot, was the final key with a name, Ithanavong. Long was terrified and turned to look at Suryaving, and saw that his face was extremely calm. It seemed that he had predicted this would happen. He only continued to wait, and sure enough, a moment later, the demons gradually appeared in the projector, turning their heads to look at Ithanavong with a sly expression. Keone took the first step. She walked slowly as if she had lost her soul. She reached out to grab Ithanavong's head when suddenly her whole body was sucked back. Long only saw Suryaving at some point lift up the ancient jar, open his mouth and suck all the demon souls into it. Dao Nok Lam's soul also appeared in the projector. His face was dazed and confused. Only when Suryaving sucked all the ghost souls into the jar, leaving only his soul, was he able to wake up. Dao Nok Lam's soul regained its consciousness, looking around. He suddenly said, "Where am I? Why can't I feel anything?" Suryaving explained, and Dao Nok Lam's soul listened attentively. Then after a while he nodded in understanding. Dao Nok Lam looked at Long and said, "I have a way to end the curse completely, without having to seal the demons. Everyone follow me." After Dao Nok Lam's soul finished speaking, he led the way inside. The 3 people looked at each other and finally followed. Suryaving alone did not understand what Dao Nok Lam was planning to do, but he still trusted and listened with all his heart. Long and Ithanavong had completely different thoughts. They found Dao Nok Lam's soul's actions extremely strange. Why did he want the 3 of them to enter the tomb? This was a question that needed to be answered. A Dao Nok Lam controlled by Naktha as a slave could not be trusted. God knew if he was still himself now. However, Long and Ithanavong still had to follow Suryaving to confirm this, in addition to keeping a close eye on Dao Nok Lam's soul. Long also wanted to see with his own eyes whether he really had a way to break the curse, and if so, how would he do it? As the 3 people entered the tomb, the stone door of the tomb suddenly slammed shut, and the scene inside suddenly turned dark. The 3 people suddenly became alert, and the space was immediately filled with clear laughter. Long stepped back, grabbed Ithanavong's hand and urged her to call Suryaving to find a way. In the dark cave, nothing could be seen clearly. Only Dao Nok Lam's voice could be heard shouting, "After I die for so long, I can finally come back to life. The Barbarian Empire will live forever." Long was terrified. Barbarian Empire? Dao Nok Lam, what do you mean by that? Dao Nok Lam's laughter still echoed. In the cave suddenly flickering flames lit up all around. There were 3 black stone coffins placed vertically against the cliff. And Suryaving was lying unconscious in one of the stone coffins. Long looked closely and saw that Ithanavong was also lying in a stone coffin, unconscious. When he looked to the side, he saw that the person he was holding hands with was Keone. The soul of Dao Nok Lam spoke. "Tran Duc Long, you didn't expect it, did you? Didn't expect that you would die here?" Long did not understand what was going on, so he asked. "Dao Nok Lam, why?" Dao Nok Lam's soul said, "Tran Duc Long, it seems like you don't know that your identity is actually the descendant of the great priest. You have that bloodline. And the fact that I tricked Suryaving into believing that I was the descendant of that bastard who had my soul locked away was also part of the arrangement that I had originally planned." Long shouted, "Dao Nok Lam, what are you saying? Why don't I understand?" Dao Nok Lam laughed and said, "What if I said Chechawang was actually my past life?" Long was startled. after Dao Nok Lam's words, he began to realize a terrifyingly clever arrangement. That his appearance here today was to serve a deep purpose that Dao Nok Lam had planned in advance, that coming to this Fu Hope Peak to break the curse was also part of Dao Nok Lam's arrangement. And that Dao Nok Lam was the brutal king who founded the barbaric dynasty 1,000 years ago, now alive again because of the devil's curse. And Dao Van Luan was just a pawn in his arrangement. Dao Nok Lam's soul continued to explain. Dao Qian Kwok's death was actually my arrangement that made Dao Van Luan kill him. Actually, Dao Nok Lam was really killed by me since he was a child, and his soul and memories were taken over by me so Dao Van Luan couldn't know. I made him go crazy and carry out my plan. Long gradually understood everything. It turned out that since Mr. Luan discovered the secret book of creating demons, it was also the time when Chechuang took the soul and came back to life. But he still did not really understand why Dao Nok Lam had to do such a spectacular trick. To lure everyone here to kill? But why did he have to kill everyone here? Dao Nok Lam's soul seemed to guess Long's thoughts, so it immediately replied. For what? You guys only believe in nonsense legends. Naktha is not just my daughter, not just the product of my incestuous relationship with my sister. She is also my woman, the barbarian queen. Long suddenly felt so disgusted that he wanted to vomit. This Chechuang was truly a sick man. Not only did he do something immoral to his sister, but the unexpected truth was that this disgusting emperor also did it to his own daughter and then killed her. Long shouted. What do you want? The ghost of Dao Nok Lam is not the ghost of Chechuang. Because in fact, Dao Nok Lam's soul has been gone for a long time. Chechuang ghost said. I want to revive her to live like me, to continue our unfinished love. I love her so much. Long said disgustedly. Love should kill? There is no such ridiculous thing. The ghost of Chechuang said. There are reasons you cannot understand. At that time she volunteered to sacrifice herself so that I could establish a barbarian dynasty. For the greater good, I could not do otherwise, but now after 1,000 years, I want her to come back to life to continue our love. The ghost of Chechuang pointed at the coffin containing Athanavong and said. She must die for Naktha's soul to enter, you must kill her yourself. I will spare Keone's life and let you two live together. Long clenched his fists and asked bitterly. What if I don't do it? The ghost of Chechuang tilted his head and said with a smile. If you don't do it, I will do it myself, and then I will kill everyone. Long clenched his teeth and thought for a long time, but in the end he still decided to choose Keone. He would have to kill Athanavong in exchange for both their lives. He looked at Chechuang and said. You won't lie to me? Chechuang tilted his head slightly and said. What's the use of me lying to you, besides I can kill you at any time. Don't worry, Keone will still be alive. The ghost Keo is controlled by Naktha. If she wants to kill someone, only heaven can stop her. After Chet Hong finished speaking, the ghost of Naktha appeared, in contrast to the scary appearance before. The ghost of Naktha at this time was very gentle and graceful, looking extremely beautiful. Even comparing Keone and Naktha, Naktha was many times more beautiful. However, when Long saw Naktha's face, he imagined the disgusting things that Chet Hong had done, so he couldn't feel any sympathy. He gritted his teeth and let go of Keone's hand, then walked closer to the coffin containing Athanavong's body. He closed his eyes, gradually reaching out to touch her neck. The corners of his eyes welled up with hot, thick tears. The taste of the tears was stinging. He slowly tightened his hands around her neck, causing it to squeeze even tighter. Athanavong coughed and choked. She gradually regained consciousness and saw Long strangling her. She screamed and struggled. Long still closed his eyes and cried. Suddenly behind him Suryabing also regained consciousness. He turned his head and saw Long strangling Athanavong. He immediately shouted in broken Vietnamese. Do not. Long turned his head to look back, and saw that the person he was strangling was not Athanavong but Keone. When he looked at the ghost of Chechuang, it laughed happily and comfortably, because it had just tricked Long. That the person he intended to strangle, in the end, turned out to be the person he chose to protect. This was a gamble, and Long was the player who was being fooled by his opponent in fraudulent games. "You!" Long shouted. The Chechawang ghost chuckled. It suddenly opened its eyes and waved its hand. Long's entire body was pushed into the coffin, then he hugged Keone. Both of them were locked deep inside, tightly packed, unable to escape. Keone just cried and couldn't say anything. Long also cried. He cried because after so long he finally got to see her again. Keone was known as Long's lover, but the two of them were only able to love each other for exactly one day before being separated by the curse of the demon Kyo. At this moment, locked in a coffin together, reminiscing about the past, the feelings between the two people were so overwhelming that it was indescribable. Time passed silently, passing forever in the coffin. The two people whispered like that, not knowing how much time had passed, and then Keone gave her daughter to Long like that. The two of them closed their eyes and waited for death in the coffin. Long had tried everything before but failed. Now the two of them could only lie there and wait for death. When both of them were exhausted and thought that all hope was lost, the lid of the stone coffin suddenly opened. A haggard face with disheveled hair appeared before Long and Keone. That person was Suryaving. Suryaving looked around, then called into the coffin and said, "Ithanavong." He waved for the two to go out, and only then did Long notice. It was another trick, because the person lying in the coffin was not Keone, but the person he was whispering to was Ithanavong. How could that happen? Because if this was Ithanavong, she could not have known what happened between him and Keone. Finally, when the two talked to confirm, they realized that, for some reason, Chechawang's ghost had used some method to switch their souls. Now the body belonged to Ithanavong, but the soul actually belonged to Keone. That's why the two talked like that without realizing that Chechawang had played a trick. Suryaving explained that when he woke up, he knew everything, and fought with the demon for a long time. He finally trapped Chechawang and Naktha's souls in the ancient jar. And when he learned Long's true identity, he urged him to use magic to seal the jar lid, causing the demon maker's curse to completely disappear. When Long finished those things, the devil's curse ended. The 5 paintings suddenly turned white without any drawings. Only Keone's body appeared right next to the painting, and that person quickly woke up. Only the body was Keone's, but the soul was Ithanavong's. A clever exchange by Chechawang's joke made Long now in a difficult position. He didn't know how to face these two people. In the end, Suryaving agreed that he would perform a procedure to exchange the souls for the two people. Suryaving agreed to do it, and immediately set to work. The soul swap ceremony was quickly performed. The souls of the two girls were swapped back to their original state. Suryaving sighed and sat down on the ground, thinking about what had just happened. Then he tried to find a way to open the cave. This cave was not designed with a key that opened from the inside. If he could not open the door, then even if all 4 of them were able to break the curse, they would still have to wait to die here. The first thing Long did was to search for the origin story of the demon's creation, right at the place where he was standing. Chechawang committed incest with his sister and gave birth to Naktha, then fell in love with Naktha and made her his queen. And after 1,000 years since the barbaric dynasty was destroyed, Chechawang was fortunate enough to somehow revive in the body of Dao Nok Lam and lead Dao Van Luan down the path of crime with deception and the bait of fame. The truly terrifying demon is not Naktha but Chechawang, because after all, Naktha is just a card to kill people in his stead. Keone was saved, and now everything was finally over. This evil story was also put to rest in the deep grave forever. After groping around for a long time, Suryaving finally discovered that the tomb had a small water tank just big enough for a person to crawl into, and this small water tank led to a cave with an underground stream leading outside. Perhaps this was the passageway the workers used to escape when creating this cave. 4 people followed that path to swim down to the underground stream, and from the underground stream it led to a small pond right next to the Phu Hope mountainside. Now, after escaping from the cave, Long had the opportunity to ask Suryaving in detail how he had killed the Chechawang in the tomb. Suryaving wrung his soaked shirt, then sat down on a rock by the pond and began to tell his story. From the moment he entered the cave, he had sensed that something was wrong with Dao Nok Lam. That was why he pretended to let Dao Nok Lam lure him inside. Then when Dao Nok Lam knocked him out, he had actually prepared himself beforehand, so he didn't actually faint, he just pretended to. He calmly watched everything before taking action. When Chechuang finished locking the two people in the stone coffin, he intended to close all three coffin lids, using the stone lids to crush the three people in the three coffins so that blood would flow out and flow into the hole in the middle of the cave. In the middle of that hole was the burial place of the real body of the demon Naktha. The body had been dry for thousands of years and needed fresh blood to revive. The animals at the foot of Phu Hope Mountain bathed in blood only to nourish its body to come back to life, and needed human blood to be effective enough to revive the demon. An ancient ritual of the barbarian dynasty, reviving the dead represents the three lives, so three people are needed. That's why Dao Nok Lam wanted to trick and lure three people to this mountain, because he wanted to use their blood to revive Naktha according to the ancient ritual. And the most important thing was the curse that the great priest sealed on Naktha's body, which needed the blood of his successor, Long. Long did not understand why he became the successor of the great pastor. Suryaving thought that Long's ancestors might have wandered from this land to Vietnam and changed their family name, most likely not following the male line, but following the female line. Or Long's ancestors might be on his mother's side, not his father's. There was one more thing Long still didn't understand, so he asked. So why did Chechuang want me to kill Athanavong? Couldn't we just lock up three people and extract their blood? Suryaving explained that the reason Chechuang wanted to do this was to take revenge for Naktha's spirit being imprisoned for 1,000 years by his ancestors. It was a cunning demon, it had lived for so many years just waiting for an opportunity to find the successor of the great priest. And when it discovered that he was that person, it was also the time when its cunning reached its peak. It did not want to kill him immediately but wanted to trick him into believing it and doing what it wanted. Finally, everything was resolved. Long and Kyo Ni returned to Vietnam and continued their normal lives. The two later got married, and Long's job returned to normal. The story of the demon maker was finally brought to an end with the death of Dao Nok Lam. At Suryaving's wooden house, Athanavong was sitting embroidering a handkerchief when she suddenly felt nauseous. Suryaving saw this and immediately ran to her side, reached out his hand and grabbed her wrist. A moment later, Suryaving's face darkened, and he said, "Are you pregnant?" Athanavong looked puzzled, but she quickly thought back to what had happened and her face turned red. What happened to Long in the cave was unknown to her. Suryaving sighed and said, "It's fate, so what do you think?" Athanavong said, "I will give birth to the baby." Suryaving said, "Why did you do that?" Athanavong turned to look out the door, looked into the distance and said, "I like him very much, I also love him, but I can't destroy their happiness. I know who he likes, I want to be able to raise the child he gave me, as a gift." Suryaving held his granddaughter's hand, his eyes filled with tears. Since Athanavong's parents died, he couldn't do much for Athanavong. When she grew up, he couldn't find a decent husband to take care of her. And to let her become a single mother like that, he felt extremely heartbroken. Suryaving suddenly turned to ask Athanavong, "So have you decided what to name the baby?" Athanavong pondered for a moment, then suddenly said, "Naktha brought me to him, it was a beautiful fate. Even though Naktha is a bad guy, he is also my matchmaker, I will use that name to name my children, as a reminder." Suryaving nodded without thinking much, he just turned his head to look up at the shrine and sighed. The temple bell rang steadily, day after day, year after year, until Athanavong gave birth to a very pretty baby girl. She named the baby Naktha Chabutkum, taking her family name and also giving the baby a Vietnamese name, Tran Thi Lan. Somewhere on Phu Hope Mountain, the strange silence in the tomb was suddenly broken by the shrill laughter in the jar in the middle of the tomb. Flocks of black sparrows suddenly rushed towards the valley to commit suicide, blood dyed Phu Hope Mountain red. The story of the ghost has truly ended, with a happy and fulfilling ending for Long and Kyo Ni. With Athanavong and her daughter with Long, Naktha Chabutkum,